Hello, Assalamu alaikum, and welcome back to another video of O Level and GCA Biology 5090. And today we'll be discussing about the whole syllabus. We'll have a overview of the whole syllabus, the TOS, the specifications, the content, and we'll also be discussing the GCE O Level Biology paper pattern. So if we take a glance at the whole assessment system of GC biology, we have total of three papers, which is paper one, which you have for the MCQs, paper two, which consists of theory questions, and then you have a choice of paper three and paper six, which are basically practical and alternative to practical, also known as ATP. So in MCQs, you basically have 40 marks paper, and the time limit given to you is actually 1 hour, which is different from the IGCSE where you only have 40 minutes to solve 40 marks MCQs. In paper 2 theory, you basically have a paper consisting of 50 marks section A, then a 20 marks section B, and section 3 where you have 10 marks, one question, and you have to choose one of them from the two questions, and the total paper marks are actually 80 marks, and the time required for it is 1 hour 45 minutes. So basically section A carries 50 marks, and it consists of small SCQs, SAQs, small number of compulsory structured questions, which are basically some of the definitions, maybe labeling, some basic points, some basic definitions, basic small details. Whereas section B actually carries 20 marks, which consist of two compulsory questions, and each question is a big one, meaning if the total marks are 20, then each question of 10 marks means two questions carrying 10 marks. And these are basically detailed questions such as the topics from plant nutrition, animal nutrition, homeostasis, muscle movement, reproduction, and maybe the last two biodiversity chapters too. Whereas section 3, you have only 10 marks where the candidate has to choose one from two questions. You basically have a choice which question you can pick. Then we have a choice between paper 3 and paper 6. Most schools basically offer paper 3, and some also refer to the extended syllabus, which requires paper 6, also known as ATP, alternative to practical. This paper 6 is basically common between GCE O level and IGCSE syllabus 2. Paper 3, the difference between two is the time. Both consist of 40 marks, but paper 3 basically has 1 hour 15 minutes, whereas in paper 6 you only have 1 hour to solve the paper. If we talk about the syllabus content, you have a first chapter known as cell structure and organization, in which we will be focusing on plants and animal cells. You may have saw my first lecture, demo lecture on plants and animal cells, where we discussed about the differences between plants and animals, microscopic features, the specialized cells, including red blood cells, root hair cells, and other muscle cells. Also, we also discussed the differences between tissues, organ system, and organism. Over here, we'll be studying each of the organelle in details, also each of the specialized cell structure in detail, and also you must be carrying out some experiments in your schools and colleges with the microscope, where you can observe the features in high resolution and also differentiate them very well. Then we have the second chapter known as the diffusion and osmosis, where we have diffusion, osmosis, and third transport system mechanism, which is known as active transport. We will be discussing the difference between three of these, which is diffusion, osmosis, and active transport. How are they related to each other? What are the roles in maintaining the concentration gradient of the cell? And what is the importance of active transport in many energy consuming process? The role of ATP, and what is the difference between all three mechanisms, gradients, and where do these processes occur, and why do these three, diffusion, osmosis, and active transport, basically occur. Then we have the third chapter, which is known as enzyme, where we are discussing the enzyme action, which basically consists of the lock and key hypothesis and the induced fit hypothesis, which basically was removed to the syllabus last year, but we still have the lock and key hypothesis this year too. Also, we'll be discussing the effects of temperature and pH on the activity of the enzyme. Then we have the fourth chapter known as the plant nutrition. This is basically a lengthy chapter which consists of the whole mechanism of photosynthesis. Then we have basically some features of plants. We'll be discussing the leaf structure in detail, and also where this plant gets its own nutrition. It makes the nutrition it gets from the soil, converts the energy into chemical energy, formation of storages, carbohydrates, its food, and also how the rate of photosynthesis is affected by varying light intensity and other also factors. Then we'll be also labeling the plant leaf structure. Leaf structure labeling is basically common in GCO level biology papers, which consist of stomata, musical cells, vascular bundles, and air spaces. Also, we would affect the lack of nitrate and magnesium ions on plant growth. We would also be discussing monocotyledons and dicotyledonous leaf in this topic too, and also discuss about the significance of all features. Then we have chapter number 5, which is known as animal nutrition. Again, a lengthy chapter just like the plant nutrition. Chapter number 4, we will be discussing nutrients, diet, world food supplies, the whole digestive system, which consists of human alimentary canal, chemical digestion, and absorption and assimilation. In nutrients, we have basically the three main categories, which are carbohydrates, fats, protein. Then we'll be further discussing the tests, iodine test, Benedict test, biuret test, and also ethanol emulsion test, fat, which is done for fats and lipids. Then we'll be discussing different types of vitamins and what can their deficiency cause in a human body. Also, we'll be discussing the concept of balanced diet and how it is related and helpful for age, sex, and activity of an individual. We would also be discussing types of human teeth, the structure and functions. Also, what happens if we do not take a proper care of our teeth. We would also be discussing about peristalsis movement, which is basically the start of digestion, and we'll go towards the excretion part where the whole digestion takes place mechanically, chemically, in all types of functions, and also the enzymes role in the digestion, such as amylase, protease, and lipase. We will also be discussing about the function of villi, the absorption, and also the large molecules. How are they synthesized into smaller basic unit? As I said, the enzymes play an important role in the fifth chapter too. Then we have the role of liver and role of fat as storage, metabolism of glucose and amino acids, and also the formation of urea and breakdown of alcohol occur in the liver. We also have chapter number 6. We have in transport and flowering plants. So basically, we'll be discussing water and ion uptake in this chapter mainly. How are the different mechanisms through which the roots absorb water and send it up to the plant, to the flower, to the leaves, and different parts too. We will also be discussing the two main processes in transportation of flowering plants, which is first is transpiration and the other is transportation. When we talk about transpiration, of course, there would be various factors such as the factors affecting the photosynthesis. Same is the case over here. There would be some factors affecting transpiration too, such as wind, temperature, humidity, and light intensity. Also, in translocation, we will be discussing deeply the functions of xylem and phloem, the difference in the structure, and also the pathway of water and food that they usually take through xylem and phloem and different parts of the flowering plants. Then we have the seventh chapter, which is known as transported humans, which is basically consisting of the whole circulatory system. We have different tissues, heart, lungs, kidney. Then we have coronary heart disease. How is it prevented? How is it caused? We'll be seeing the components of blood, which are plasma, red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets in detail, and then discussing the transfer of materials between capillaries and tissue fluid. Also, we would identify red blood cells, RBCs, and WBCs under light microscope, and be discussing the detailed features which we have also covered in chapter number 1, the specialization and cell structure. Step number 8 name is respiration, in which we have three main specific TOS points, which is aerobic and anaerobic respiration, also human gas exchange. We will be discussing about muscle contraction, the use of oxygen in the body, protein synthesis, cell division, active transport, and also what is the difference between aerobic and anaerobic, how is the function difference, how is the need different, when are they needed, why are they needed, and what will happen if they do not occur. Also, we'll be discussing the percentages of gases in atmospheric air and investigate the difference between inspired and expired air. Last but not the least, we will also be discussing the role of celiac diaphragm ribs and intercostal muscles in this chapter too. Then we have excretion also at the end of digestion, we have this excretion which consists of two main TOS points, the kidneys and dialysis. Over here we'll be discussing the excretion, the removal of toxic materials. Then we will labeling the diagram of kidneys, which is when have been asked many times in O-level biology paper. Also removing urea and excess salt from water and details of kidney structure too, which is basically not required but helps in understanding the chapter. Then we'll be discussing dialysis and the kidney machines, which are basically given at the time of kidney failure. We have homeostasis as a chapter number 10, in which if, we don't go in the detail is done in A levels, but the homeostasis basics contains the structure and function of the skin. How is homeostasis controlling and maintaining the environment of the human body, and what is the functions and what is negative feedback? The diagram of skin here, sweat glands playing a role in homeostasis. Also different receptors in skin, sweating, shivering, blood vessels in the skin. We will be basically discussing what happens in a hot environment, how in a cold environment, and how homeostasis is maintaining the overall environment inside the body. Then we have chapter number 11, known as coordination and response, in which we have nervous system, receptors, reflex section, and hormones. Here we have a central nervous system, also the section of the brain which consists of cerebellum, pituitary gland, and hypothalamus, which are also helping in maintaining the constant environment and moreover the principal functions of the above structures too. Then we have eye, in which we'll be discussing the pupil reflex. Then we have neurons such as sensory, relay, motor neurons. Also, we have hormones carrying out different processes in the body, produced by the brain, pituitary gland, and all the glands in the body. We'll also be discussing the role of hormones in insulin and diabetes, which is controlling blood sugar and glucose concentration. We have chapter number 12 known as support, movement, and locomotion, which we have bones, joint, and agonistic muscles. Over here, the kind of should be able to describe the diagram, photograph, and real specimens of the main bones of the forelimb. We can also describe the type of movement permitted by the ball and socket joints, and we will be also discussing the muscles at the hinge joint. Then we have chapter number 13 known as the use and abuse of drugs, in which we'll be discussing the four main components of antibiotics, heroin, alcohol, and tobacco smoke, which is included in your syllabus. Nothing else than this. We'll be describing the effects of these drugs, also the use of drugs, when are they needed, when are they in excess, and also recognize the fact that many people regard smoking as no longer socially acceptable. Why is that, and what is the harm of smoking? We also have the 14th chapter, Microorganisms in Biotechnology. The detail is done in A levels, but basically the basics start at the O level. We have food biotechnology and industrial biotechnology too, in which we'll be discussing the role of yeast, the role of bacteria, the use of fermenters, and also the role of fungal penicillium in the production of penicillin. We have chapter number 15 known as the relationships of organisms with one another and with the environment, in which we will be discussing the whole ecosystem in terms of energy flow, food chains, carbon and nitrogen cycle, parasitism, effects of humans on the ecosystem, pollution and conservation. We'll be discussing about the sun as a principal source of energy. Then we discuss the different types of food webs, including producer, consumer, herbivore, carnivores, and the other food chains, including a decomposer too. We will also discuss the importance of nitrogen and carbon cycle in our ecosystem. Then we have types of pollution, a detailed life cycle of pathogens which are not even required in the syllabus but helps in understanding once again. Also, we'll be discussing different types of pollution, including water pollution, air pollution, and also the effect on the biodiversity because of the pollution. Then we have chapter number 16 known as development of organisms and continuity of life, which is basically based on the reproduction of plants and humans and AIDS and such as the STI, sexually transmitted diseases. We discuss about gamete formation, the whole process, the functions in plants such as sepals, petals, anthers, and carpels, the male and female part, the detailed structure, and also the difference between sexual and asexual reproduction, followed by the pollination and distinguishing between self-pollination and cross-pollination. Then we have inheritance, which consists of topics like variation, chromosomes, and DNA, and we also have selective variation too, and genetic engineering. Here we'll be discussing the two main topics, which is the production of gametes, the inheritance, the dominant recessive types of allele, the phenotype and genotype of the body. Then we'll be discussing the some of the diseases caused by chromosomal mutations, which the two of them included in the syllabus consist of sickle cell anemia and Down syndrome. Then we have different types of dominance, including codominance, incomplete dominance, and complete dominance. Then we have determination of sex in humans, which is XX in males and XY in females. After that, we'll be discussing the role of DNA in inheritance and the role of proteins in chromosomes and inheritance too. Here we have, when we discuss about paper 3 and paper 6, it's basically practical assessment of students, which is mostly carried out in labs for practice, but when you have to write it down, we usually write all the steps. So basically, whichever practical assessment route is chosen, either it's paper 3 or ATP, which is paper 6, the following point should be noted, which is that the practical skills are to be learned and developed. Also, you must have a theoretical understanding for all the practical work. For example, you should know the operators, the type of operator, the type of experiments, the control, the variable of those specific experiments. How are you supposed to plot a graph? How are you supposed to understand the relation between two constants, the two variables, how one thing impacts the other, and how can you all jumble it into an experiment? So that's the end of the video. I hope you liked the video and got a basic concept of O-level biology and what is the main syllabus and what is the paper pattern about the practical, the MCQs, difference between all the question types you are asked in all the section A, B, and C. I hope this video helped. We'll meet again with another video another time. Stay tuned, subscribe, and see you.